Welcome to another figure week, hard surface week, organic week.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Artcast. Thanks for tuning in again to another episode. And again, as I always say with these episodes during the pandemic, hope you guys are keeping safe and busy with whatever projects you're working on at the moment. Great response to everything we've had recently with the episodes going out. Of course, last with guys like Mark, Joe, and other guys we've had on. A really great response in the chat and Discord, and your suggestions are definitely being noted. When you guys are putting out people you want to hear, I'm definitely trying to hunt these guys down and get them on. So one thing we have had a lot of people asking if was a diversity outside of concept art and outside of 3D to some maybe niche disciplines or things that aren't seen as very common in the industry. So I've been on a mission for a long time, and this artist finally got back to me. So that we could actually have a chat and talk about his career and the things he's done in the industry. Maybe give you guys the idea into something else you can try out or other jobs that are available in the games industry. So if you guys can welcome along today, my guest, Billy Garretsen. Hey, Billy.
What's going on?
Yeah, thank you for coming on the podcast and chatting with us. It's an honor to have you on. Hopefully it's going to be a good conversation.
Yeah, totally. I thought it was. I feel honored to be representing. I think I guess a less represented, faction of art, and it would be in interface design, user interface design, user experience, graphic design, basically that whole world that isn't concept art and modeling.
Yeah, the more kind of rock star stuff that everybody kind of aims for when they first in the industry. So yeah, it's the cool kids. It's the cool kids club when you do all that kind of stuff. But you obviously have a very important role to play in games. And so if people don't know you, Billy, if people don't know of your work or what you do specifically, could you run just like a short intro, just to introduce yourself and what you do?
Sure. Billy Garretsen. I'm currently the UX design lead at Airship Syndicate. We recently shipped Darksiders Genesis. Before that, we shipped Battlechasers Night War. I've been pretty much exclusively in user interface and user experience design for almost 20 years now. And we can get into how that happened. But I'm traditionally an artist. I went to university to learn fine arts, and so I have a lot of fine arts principles. But that definitely was the springboard into interactive art and interactive, design and stuff like that. So I'm trying to think of, any other big notable work before Airship Syndicate. I was at Artcraft Entertainment. I helped kickstart the Crowfall MMO Kickstarter that is still going today. I think they're about to hit beta. It's looking really good. If anyone's interested in like just how games are made, you just look at the past 5 years, every year take a different screenshot or a snapshot of the game Crowfall, and you could just see the evolution of the ideas and how it's just gotten so polished now.
Nice.
But yeah, I'll say
you also do art. like kind of Marvel and comic art, and there's bits and pieces you've done for comics as well, right?
Sure. Yeah. I think I traditionally I don't sleep very much, and I'm always busy. And when I can't get that that illustration, that artistic itch out of my system at work,
Mhm.
I'll take it home with me, and I'll collaborate with like John Boy Myers, Mike Bowden, some other comics dudes who have really killer lines. And so I'm training again. I'm traditionally trained in painting, but I'm actually pretty new to digital painting. And so I use other people's work as a great training tool to okay, I don't have to focus on the subject matter because it's already kind of laid out. Now I can just focus on the rendering and stuff. And so,
Yeah.
So a lot of my work is, uh, goes into like the comics territory and stuff, which is actually my first love.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Comic books. But yeah, so I mean, we'll get into this too, but like illustrate user interface and user experience actually taps into the artistic brain quite a bit. It's still a visual
Mhm.
communication tool, even if it's not a character or like world building.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting as well because when I initially left my job, I mean, for me also comics was my first love, so we definitely share that. I think my first art book, before we recorded, me and Billy were geeking out and showing all our different art books and things we had in our bookcases. But my first art book was Jim Lee's Heroes or Icons, sorry. And that kept me warm for many nights. Which I think, Billy's going to say like, "Oh, I've got that one too. Yeah, I've got the
That
yes,
one.
that's the one. That's the one. That is the one. Yes, yes." Uh, but because early on, I think it was also one of the more popularized versions of illustration. Because even when I started and I left my job, when I started looking at art or even working in games back in 2008, concept art wasn't even a thing. Like it was a thing, but it wasn't like a publicly seen thing. It wasn't as in your face as it is now. So for a lot of people, when they looked at drawing, it was comics, right? So but then I learned quickly how horribly those guys are treated and how low they're paid. So, I mean, like some guys have great careers, but it is, I would say, 10 times more difficult than breaking into games or movies. I think
I think
comics is a
it's
very.
saturation. I think the internet
Mhm.
and digital technologies have made it to where it's democratized the industry in a lot of ways. You don't have to go to fancy schools. You could just be talented and have a platform and an audience, and it makes you
Mhm.
viable. It makes you, it can build. You can build a career just off of that. Um,
Mhm.
but what was I going to say? Yeah, I mean, touching on you saying like concept art wasn't so much of an official thing. It kind of has become more of that. I mean, like
Mhm.
that's user experience in a nutshell, especially in video games. Um,
Mhm.
it's only recently been kind of a named necessity of any production is to have a user experience
Yeah,
team, and user experience is different than user interface. We could talk about that in a bit if you want, but
of
just
course.
kind of sharing some of the history of what resources were available for artists or designers who may have had the aptitude to do user experience. Like eh, those courses didn't exist. I graduated college in 2004. Though they didn't have even a user interface class at my art and design school,
Right.
right? They didn't, and let alone user experience. So those are
Mhm.
concepts that have really become um, hardened and solidified over the past, I'd say probably decade, right? I think we're seeing a lot more in the past 5 years, but really it's the past decade is when you started having schools
Mhm.
acknowledge those particular disciplines and create courses around them, and having studios have those named roles and have
Mhm.
qualifications for people who knew things about like human interaction design and even human psychology. A lot of human psychology goes into user experience as well. But yeah, so I think it's
Yeah.
interesting. Like you're talking about kind of having to learn in the field, right? You learned illustration, you learned concepting and stuff just kind of by doing and
Mhm.
figuring it out without a lot of
Yeah.
structured teaching and stuff. I mean, the same thing with like UI. Like a lot of what I know about
Mhm.
UI right now is just from doing so much of it out in the wild, right? And it's only now that I'm
Right.
like,
Yeah.
I'll read an academic study. And I'm like, Oh yeah, totally. That makes sense. Yeah, I've been doing that for years, but now I know
Yeah,
now I know what it's called. I called it
yeah.
something else,
It's
right?
got a name. Yeah, yeah.
So
I mean, like it's because I'm interested as well because when I left my job initially, there was no, especially where I'm from in Scotland, like in the UK in general, there wasn't a lot of games art courses. It was like you said, it was traditionally fine art, painting, illustration, atelier skills, stuff like that. But then the thing I actually gravitated towards and I found was the most interesting through the course I done was I ended up going to what they called at the time a visual communication course. So I done graphic design for 2.5 years and basically built logos and banner pages and books and advertisement. And then I went into 3D design and done 3D at university. But like the visual communication stuff is something that I've like. There's a really awesome designer that I've followed for many years called is it Aaron James Draplin, who is a graphic designer out in I think in Pennsylvania, and he like he's wrote a few books on one of them's called Draplin Design Theory, and it's all about graphic design and shapes and logos. And the thing I loved about him was he was trying to rebrand and or bring back old um vintage logos and stuff that was on like truckers uniforms for like 20 years ago. So he would go what he called scrapping. So he would drive through all these scrap sales in people's basements and find logos from like 20, 30 years ago, like industrial logos, and then take all those designs and try and rebrand them into modern stuff. Because he felt like there was too much abstractness or too much modern stuff that wasn't really meeting the facilitation of logos, especially for corporations. So he was like trying to go back and find the stuff that worked like 40 years ago and then reuse it. Um, so like I think graphic design in a sense is now coming back in a wave that hasn't been for, since like one of the industrial revolutions, right?
you said, talking about visual communication and graphic design, like that is essentially what has become user experience in a lot of ways, or it's evolved into like, a track that's what user experience really is. It's like, it's communicating, thoughts and feelings. It's driving player, it's basically creating expectation. When you look at a logo or a brand, which I've done plenty of, a lot of times, the first thing I'll ask the client or the collaborator, I say, hey man, give me, what are the three things that really define this thing? Like, and it could be emotions, it could be whatever, like what three attributes. And so it could be like, it needs to be strong. It needs to look bespoke, like handmade, like it can't look tooled or machine made, right? And it needs to look like it's sturdy, right? You just kind of come up with these words that like, they could be fluff, but it's enough to be like, okay, cool. Those are things that I can put into this logo so that when you look at it as a viewer, you have an expectation. Oh, this is going to be scary. Oh, this is going to be exciting. Oh, this is going to be pretty dry. This is like a law firm. You know what I mean? Like there's a certain expectation that has to be built up front. Otherwise, when they walk through the door, when they pop in the disc, when they open up the book, if it doesn't match the promise of the front, right, of the signage, then there's disappointment or there's conflict, and then from there people have a bad experience. So I actually think like branding in a lot of ways and visual communication, it really is the cornerstone of a lot of interface, because interfaces are nothing but just bombarding you with information, and the role of that information is to help you make the next choice so that you can continue to have fun, so you can continue to have a good time, or a reward loop or something like that. Like the interface can't get in the way. And so people who are really good at interface are people who are usually really good at like page layout, like publication page layout with and iconography. People who know how to sum up a big idea into one tiny little glyph. So I think all those skill sets that used to be just bucketed into the School of Visual Arts, right, or visual communication. Oh, you're a graphic designer. Now it's become a lot more granular, right? You do have people who are visual graphic designers, and now you have people who are visual interface designers, right? Maybe they're not the ones driving a lot of the user flows, but they know that this screen has to have these components, and I'm going to make it really pretty. Okay, cool. It's a Bejeweled styled game, so I'm going to make everything look really gemmy and super duper gilded, right? And so, this is where that dedicated role of the user experience person, the designer, is now defined, right? So a user interface artist is the one who kind of takes it to full and makes it a really pleasing an engaging looking screen, for instance, right? The user experience person is the one who's trying to figure out what the screen's purpose is. Where does it fit in the overall flow of the game, right? Just take Bejeweled, for example, or like a Candy Crush or something like that. Okay, cool. Start up the game. First thing I want to do, click the big play button. Cool. The next thing, map. Oh shit! Like look at all these nodes. I have to fill all these nodes out, and so it kind of creates this desire to progress, right? And then you hit a button, and then now it's a match 3 game, and now you're doing match 3. And every once in a while, you have to pick power ups, and there's just all these elements to it. So a user experience person is the person who maps out every single one of those screens, right? If you break every single feature into a screen, it's a moment that the player has to engage with the product, either to push OK or to make one of 3 choices or to slide gems for 2 minutes until the next screen comes up. We break down every single one of those screens. We have to understand the intent of every screen, right? Because every screen can't be the coolest, sexiest screen. Then the player won't understand the value of what they're doing, right? So, you break down, this is just this is a confirmation screen, right? So this user interface artist, right? Like, downplay this one. This one's very simple. This is just a yes/no choice, right? This next screen, this is where you choose what your reward box is going to be. So this is like a destination screen. You're going to get to this screen and you're going to take your time because, you're going to nail bite. Which one's it going to be? So if you notice there, nothing about what I just described has anything to do with art, right? It's completely about emotion and psychology and intent. Like, what is the play? Like, you're basically breaking down the whole experience into an emotional story. From the moment you click play to the moment you shut the game down, the user experience designer is basically tracking your time and trying to balance it in a way that it makes sense and it feels natural and organic. You're right. The worst games are the ones where you're on a roll and then a screen comes up that completely wrecks the momentum that you've built as a player emotionally, right? You're like, I'm about to hit this thing. Confirmation pop up. What the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, you don't want that reaction. So anyways, obviously I get excited about this stuff because when I think of a game, especially as an emotional experience or as a string of emotions that crescendo and have a payoff, I get excited about that because that's what I like to build. You know what I mean? And so that's what user experience really is. It's understanding the big picture and how we get from point to point to point, and then we can define that and then hand it off to the user interface artist to then flesh out and make the product, right? They basically add all the bells and whistles that all work towards the goal of, this is a rewarding screen. We need to make the player feel really good here. So it needs, 10x the amount of animation and sparkles from the particle effects, right? Versus this is basically a EULA screen. So 0 fanfare, readability, big confirm button at the bottom. That's all it has to be, right? So, those requirements are given over to the user interface artist, and the artist makes it really awesome. I happen to be both right now. And actually, that's something that is very typical from the people that I work with and the people I've met is it's hard to do one without also at least having the aptitude to do the other. Like, you have UI artists that are actually really, really good at wireframing and building out user flows. And you've got UX designers who are actually really good artists, right? And so I've been able to bridge the gap over my career, kind of focusing in the art world first, but, you build enough interfaces and eventually you're like, you get how the flows are supposed to go. And then you start to have your own ideas about how to make it a better experience. And then boom, you're a UX designer at that point, right? So, hopefully that breakdown was easy enough to follow. Like, do you get
100%.
Cool.
Yeah, I was just going to say with you with starting with projects as well, does everything really begin with you in a dotted sketchbook with a flowchart? Is that how you can initially build your ideas?
I think just like every artist, illustrator is different in how they start.
Right.
What you just described is how a lot of people approach UX. They think of the big picture, and they think of like, I know I'm going to have a level up screen. I know I'm going to have a skill tree. I know I'm going to have a this. And so they just really start to just kind of pencil out, stub in those screens and figure out how it all connects into a big picture. I go the other way around, to be honest with you, because
Okay.
like most times I need, like, I'll take let's say in Battlechasers, for instance, right? When I was brought on to Battlechasers, I was brought on to start working on the combat HUD because it was just like, hey, come in and kind of spruce up the combat HUD. We need to make an E3 demo. It was going to be a really short thing, right? So rather than really really break it down into a bunch of granular detail, I just took a screenshot of combat and I just worked on top. I essentially went to full quality art and I dreamed what it was going to look like. Same thing with like the crafting screens and all that kind of stuff. I needed to play it, right? And this is a personal thing. I'm not saying like this is the way to make interface and this is the way to approach UX.
Of course, yeah.
But the way that I make games, if I can look at a screen and I'm already playing it in my head, there's a get it factor. It's like I already know. Oh, I know how I got here. This is a slide out panel. This panel slid out after I talked to this NPC, and like a lot of the pieces and this how it stitches together, it kind of happens naturally. But for me, it always starts with I need to play the game in my head. I need to look at this static screen, and it's already a game in my mind, right? And for some people, they can go wireframe. I can do that, but I've also collaborated with enough people who don't have the gift of being able to look at a napkin drawing and know that it's going to be an amazing painting. Like I have to take it to full in order not just for myself to see the game, but for other people to see the game as well. So that's what I typically do. I'll get an idea. It's not even a concrete idea. Like on a lot of our new games and stuff, a lot of times stuff gets thrown my way. It's like, hey, we're thinking about having this type of feature. And that's it. And then I just kind of make something up that looks like the game we're building. And everyone looks at it and says, dude, that is like 50% there. Sometimes it's 90% there. Those are good days, right? Yeah. But even 50% there is enough to know, okay, cool. Like this stuff works, this stuff doesn't, but now we can trash that 50 and then refine it until it's 100% what we're going to build. Right. So yeah, it's a little different, but I actually think that I approach UX the way that like a sculptor or an illustrator would approach their work is, you kind of build up in layers. You build up in layers, and then it just kind of forms, you know what I mean? Like it's a really organic process. And I hate to sound like it is an academic process too. Some people really, really approach it academically and they're a lot more mathematical and scientific about how they design games. But I think maybe it's just the way my brain works. I came from the art world first and I became a UX guy.
Right.
So I approach the process very much like I would any other piece of art.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well with you where, especially in Airship, because they have that stylized aesthetic, is that, you can not only wireframe something or build out a user experience, but you can also almost hand illustrate, or what you do, hand illustrate those icons to an aesthetic level that, like a graphic designer possibly wouldn't or couldn't do, beyond, simple shapes in Illustrator. You're physically painting, rock textures, lava textures, stuff that is sitting flowing out of the icon. Is that something you think makes you or other people would make them stand above and beyond other UI UX designers if they can do that or do both?
I mean, I think it really depends on the studio. Because someone who is a fantastic illustrator may be completely underutilized or out of place working on a game like, let's say, like Call of Duty, and it's like Battle Royale, which is it's very modern, it's very clean, or hell, even Destiny, like Destiny has a lot of texture and depth to the images, but it doesn't look hand drawn or illustrated. It's very machined and intentionally, right?
Yes.
It's a sci-fi. Very decadent sci-fi game, so it's not meant to look ragtag and rickety and stuff. That's also, I mean, again, if you're going to work for a company, I mean, it is a true marriage of what you're bringing to the table and what the company needs and what what their style is. My style matches the style of Airship. I like stuff that looks almost like comic-y. Like I come from, like, my background is in comics, and that's what I wanted to do. I got into games. We can tell that story in a bit if you want, but like, I came into games completely haphazardly. I never expected to be in games. I wanted to be a comics artist, and so I approach everything kind of in that kind of handmade, again, bespoke, boutique, way. Like, you want to see the artist's hand in the game. Like the minute that we put out a game that looks generic, like that's the day Airship dies. And luckily, we're just tripling down on things looking airshipy, if that's a word. But yeah, no, I think at Airship, all of our UX UI guys are strong illustrators. I think at any other studio that would not be a requirement. I think being a good graphic designer, being a good vector artist, but really, I think other studios, it would just be enough to be a good information layout designer. Like, hey, I came from magazines, but now I have a job in UX because I'm really good at information layout. Because when you look at my stuff, you know exactly where your eye's supposed to go. You know exactly how to read it. Like that stuff is crazy valuable. I think, again, all my guys have that skill as well. But I wouldn't say it's a requirement. If anyone's watching that, like, thinks, oh man, I'm not a painter. I guess I really can't do this job. That's not at all a requirement. And dude, it's a team effort. Like, if you can't draw, that's fine. Like, other people can. Like, and be okay with that. Like, it's okay if you might be weak in something that someone else can, like, pick up the slack on. And guess what? That's how collaborations form. That's how good, strong teams are formed, is when people lean on each other's, superpowers, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a thing as well. I think, especially like in bigger studios, right? You would probably typically have, in a massive studio, maybe 300-400 people. The UI guys would obviously build the layout and the UX stuff, but then they would pass that off to art to make icons or buttons or other stuff that's, if it needs to be illustrated or more arty. But then it's a thing as well where you're in a unique situation with Airship, where you guys are I say a small team, relatively small compared to massive studios. But then it's like, I think it also builds off the fact that it's a weird thing I try to talk to students about, is like, it's the fit, right? Like, students and people think that it's an impossible task to get a job in games, but it really is 90% of the fact is that you have to find a studio that fits you as an artist, right? Your style, your aesthetic, what you love doing. That's one thing that, like, can take us just as long to find as a studio that fits around you as well.
Sure. Yeah, and it's a journey, I mean, like, I feel like it's taken me 20 years to find my home in this industry. And for some people, I mean, like, especially like young people in their careers, they get really distraught when their first job isn't the dream job. And it could even be at a dream. The worst is when it's at a dream studio, but it's not the dream job, right? It's like a double disconnect. I'm not saying like you have to like suffer for like a bunch of years before you get your due. Like, it's not that at all. I mean, like, work hard, build good relationships, and good things tend to happen. It's I mean, I don't mean to oversimplify, the path, but like, it really boils down to that common base is, just being in the industry is lucky, because there's so many people. It's getting more and more competitive, right? There's so many people that want that job, and you're in. Even if it's not like the lead concept artist, or like, okay, I'm not concepting characters like I wanted to, like I'm really good at that. I have all these like fan arts and studies of like League of Legends characters. Like, I'm really good at that thing, but all they want me to do is do rocks and foliage. And I can do that, but it's not what I love. It's not my passion. Like, if you can show that company that you're just as good at rocks and foliage and have a good attitude about it, guess what's going to happen? They're going to start giving you character work when, and a lot of times it has to happen where it's spillover work when the other guys can't handle it. Guess what you get to be? You get to be the hero. You get to have this opportunity. And it's funny, those guys draw characters day in, day out to the point where people don't even talk about it anymore. It's not impressive anymore. And all of a sudden you get to be oh my God, did you know the Rocks and Foliage guy just did a badass character? Can you believe that? And all of a sudden you're a character guy. Like it's just, there is a clean, organic progression that happens in a career if you're willing to put in the time and dedication, right? I think a lot of folks rob themselves from having success because they're impatient, or they don't let it come to them. They try to bring it to them forcefully, and it creates friction, and it actually hurts relationships. And that's when, people lose hope that there's a future for them in a studio, and then that's when they move on. I definitely think that the true path to success in this industry, probably others, but all my history is here in games, is relationships. If people can vouch for you, it's so amazing. People love to work with the same people if they're good people and talented and they're just cool. Like, you spend so much time in a room making a game with the same people day in, day out, that if you don't like those people and you move on, you're not going to recommend those other people to come with you. You know what I mean? And so almost everything that I've done, like my first job, I just cold applied for the first studio I worked for. It was a casino gaming company, like fresh out of college.
Right.
Every other job after that came to me from a recommendation. Like someone said, hey, there's a thing that I want you to consider. Basically, and that's not meant to be like a humble brag or anything. It's just like, I just feel like it's just the proof point.
No.
Like if you get a reputation for being good at what you do. Also, by the way, talent is just completely a given. Like if you're in this industry, no one's going to gush about your talent because they expect you to be talented. Everyone's talented. That's what's cool about it, right? It's like we're all like basketball players playing basketball together, right? Like it's just like we're all kind of using our skill sets in cool ways to make cool products. So, don't focus on, be talented. That's a given, right? But like, be cool to work with, man. Like, don't make it all about you. Celebrate other people's accomplishments, and they'll celebrate yours. And build a reputation for being a dependable person who's level-headed, who isn't selfish, who isn't self-centered, and all that kind of stuff. And guess what? People want to work with you. They want to keep working with you. And you may move on somewhere, and you might be able to recommend someone. Someone else might move somewhere that you want to be, and they recommend you, and then they pull you along. Like, it's so much easier to succeed when you have other people who care about your success.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something I've learned because, like I says, I don't have a stellar foothold in the industry right now, but then a lot of people like having me around, mostly because I'm easier to get on with and people can have a conversation with me. So it just means that when the talent eventually catches up and I have the portfolio or the body of work, then it might be a little bit easier for me to find work because I know people and I know I've built a relationship. So I think that's the one thing that I found when I was leaving university was a struggle for a lot of students was building those connections, was building those relationships, going to events, meeting people, talking to art directors. A lot of people expect you just to sit online constantly and put stuff out, and then eventually, I mean, you can do that also. You can put a ton of work out online and still get work, but then building relationships, I think, is so important. I mean, then you talked about like your first set of jobs, because obviously now you're at Airship. You didn't start at Airship, right? So what was your first experience in the game industry starting off?
Actually, it was in college. I was 19. Like I said, I wanted to be a comics artist. I was following guys like Trent Kanuga and Joe Mad, guys who were really young and kind of made a name for themselves while they were really young. And I wanted to be that guy too. I wanted to be like that really young, hot artist. Dude, my illustration ability at that time was nowhere. Like it's bad. I'm embarrassed to even say like that was my motivation, was to be like those guys when I was so far out of their league. But it was a motivation, or at the very least, it was a direction I wanted to head. I wanted to be a comics artist. And so I got accepted to the University of Texas, which is a pretty prestigious school here in Texas. I actually got accepted to other schools that were better art schools for what I wanted to do. But because of the prestige of UT, I went to UT instead. And I either loved it a lot or I hated it a lot, because I went into a 5-year art program, but I graduated in 3. Every summer, every Christmas, whatever. Anytime I could take extra classes, I did. And I just
Nice.
worked my ass off to get out of college because I mean I love school, I love learning, but I hated the amount of work I had to do and I didn't get paid for it. You know what I mean? Like it was just one of these things. Like I could be working this hard and actually making money and getting on with my life. So I just wanted to get out really quickly. But I was in the middle of a fine arts program, so I was learning life drawing, illustration, painting, lithography. But just as a fun little, hey, this sounds interesting. There was a videography class, like a transmedia class that was like, okay, cool. We're actually gonna like it's art, but it's we're gonna use cameras, we're gonna use After Effects, we're gonna use all sorts of like digital technologies to make interesting art. And that was actually the first time. I mean, shit, that was the first time I ever even used a Wacom tablet. I was completely non-digital in my art at all. So it was the first time I used a Wacom tablet. First time I ever had any Adobe product open in front of me, and it was just like, a whole new world. Kid in a candy shop. I just felt like, oh my god, so many more tools for expression. And I'm a dabbler. Like I like tools. Like I compose music, and I would compose stuff in Cakewalk and like Fruity Loops and stuff like that. So like I like tinkering in a program. I 3D model in like Max and stuff. So like I like learning new programs. And so the Adobe stuff came my way. I'm like, oh my god, right? So sorry. So that was an introduction into that world of digital art and animation, right? Because in this video art class, I learned motion graphics and stuff using After Effects, right? So that was a little bit of a foot in the door of like just getting a taste of that tool set, right? I'm still an illustrator. I'm still like, my goals are not that, right? That was really just like it seemed like an easy 3 hours credit that I could get, right? And it was, but the real value there was introduction into the tools. A year later, right? I'm 19 at this point. Some of my best friends who are also in college with me, they went the programming route, right? And they say, hey, we want to develop a video game for the Pocket PC, right? The hot mobile product, Pocket PC. Oh my god, like no one had Pocket PCs, but they were just hot on this idea of like, dude, there's like, we don't have to have dev kits. Basically it was like the reason why a lot of people do iPhone development now is because it's like they don't have restrictions like they have before, right, where like you had to have a dev kit, you had to have a certain amount of equity in your company in order to be a licensee for like Nintendo or Sony or whatever, right? So, but Pocket PC was like this open, it was the iPhone before the iPhone, and they wanted to make a video game. They were making a platformer engine. Also, by the way, this is before Unity. This is before, I think even before like Torque. If you're familiar with the Torque engine by Garage Games.
Oh yeah.
And so this is before all that stuff was available to us. So they made an engine. They made a tile editor. They made an importing tool that could take, a bitmap sprite sheet of a character animated into their engine and make things move. Like they basically, their experiment was, can we make an engine? Can we make a video game from it? The video game is the proof point of the engine and technology that they were building. And they had no content. They had no artists. They didn't even have a design for the game, like a story. They didn't. So they just said, hey, Billy, you're an artist. What do you think, right? And I just, without really thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, cool, I'll do it. First thing I did, I put together a design document. It was basically just 10 pages of just doodles of like different characters and different levels. And it was just a ripoff of Ninja Gaiden. It was basically like if, Ninja Gaiden, Mega Man, that type of platformer. But I had sketches of like, okay, this is what the level tiles will look like. But it was all by hand. It was all, just me in a sketchbook kind of designing out what this game was going to be. Mm-hmm. Again, I had no expectation for what this thing was going to become. I had no idea what I was even in for. I just started. I had the opportunity and I said, sure, why not? I love video games. It's not what I'm going to do, but it's an outlet for my art. That's all I thought of. It's an outlet for my, because I'm like, cool, this illustration of this character, especially in the dialogue, like that's all I cared about, cool character art. But I committed to this thing, and I had to learn how to do pixel sprites for not even just, sprite art. Like I had to learn how to technically make tile sets that could join up and build worlds with it. And I was the level builder. I designed the levels. I designed the tile sets. I designed the characters. I had to do all the sprite art for the characters and the animation cycles and everything like that. And, I didn't have optimized tools for this. So I did it. It probably took me 5 times longer than it should have, just because I was also learning how to do pixel art in Photoshop and build sprite sheets, and anyone who's built a sprite sheet knows,
Right.
hey, if you're just one pixel off, your little animation will start to jitter and shift, and there was all sorts of learning. Anyway, so this whole process took about a year and a half. Definitely. By the time I graduated college, we had shipped this game. So we set out to do this thing, and we succeeded. We finished and shipped the game. It was in like a magazine, right? It got Pocket PC's Action Game of 2003. It was a game called Blade of Betrayal. So bad.
Nice.
So cliche too. But like, at the very least, it was like we got some positive reinforcement, even if our game was a crappy game by any, modern standard. Someone recognized it, right? And it felt good. It felt good to like make something and share something. And so, it created this new interest and new desire to work in games. I pretty much abandoned my comic book endeavors, like cold turkey, just because I'm like, dude, it was so satisfying. Like it was so much effort and it was so hard and a lot of sacrifice nights. I could have been partying. I could have been doing this in college. I could have been doing so many other things, but I chose to tinker and learn something. And, it was funny because I didn't learn anything from the classes that I end up doing today. Like it's all kind of discovery through doing this game project. And just like that, I just decided, hey man, like I think video games is where it's at because I get to do art. I get to do all the things that I like to do, but then I also get to do with other people. That was the big thing. Like in comics, it is a team, right? If you really break it down to the traditional roles of like a penciler, an inker, a colorist, etc., editors, like it's a collaborative team, but it's a lot more focused and individualized, I think. Whereas in games, you might have some individual moments in a product, but like it's largely the culmination of everyone working together. And so I just love that. I became that guy. I learned that about myself, right? That I like being on a team, being cool and recognized as an individual, like that's awesome too. But then I got to feel what it's like to share that feeling with other people, and it felt better. It definitely felt better to share the success. And so, but at the time in Austin, I graduated. I had made no leads in video games or whatever, and I thought, oh well, I've shipped a game. This is going to be impressive. And at the time Acclaim was still a company, and we had like Origin and we had some cool companies here in town, but no one was impressed by my Pocket PC game. So I took the first game job I could, and that ended up being in casino games. At the time it was called Multimedia Games. Now it's called Every Technologies, but it's still here. Huge company, one of the biggest companies you've never heard of in gaming. But it's like real deal casino games, not like online Facebook casino games like Zynga or whatever. It's like actual physical cabinets. And and what's interesting is I thought, okay, I'll just do this for a couple months, and I'll just keep applying to other jobs while I do this for just money for now, and I'll do something later. I was there for 7 years. I ended up falling in love with it almost immediately because outside of like casino games aren't that sexy, But to be honest, I actually think a lot of people I've met, like that's how they got their start. They worked in casino games. Casino games aren't sexy, but they're there. There's an opportunity for your career in casino games, especially as an artist, because every game, think about it this way, every game is like a whole different world. Every new game, oh, I'm doing a game about the Aztecs now. I'm doing a game now about, pirates. I'm doing a game that takes place in Atlantis. I'm doing a game that, all the themes of these games go across the entire spectrum. And if you think about as an artist in training, that is the best and fastest way to get better and to learn different techniques. At this point now, I can render any material. Like I can make any material look like what it's satin, scaly material, chrome, brushed steel. You know what I mean? Like you just learn how to make all those materials because the themes require it. But more than anything else, like casino games are essentially all interface. You don't think about it that much, right? But like when you're looking at a casino game screen, it's nothing but interface. So sorry, this is a very long roundabout way to say like how I even got into UI was
I'm loving this, Billy. You talk as much as you want.
that first job set the tone because
Yeah.
I already got a taste of what it was like to use other skill sets outside of just illustration to make a video game.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
And but in my first game, it was not a very heavy menu driven game. It was very much all action was on the screen. So I designed a HUD. Like interface wise, it was really just a HUD and some level completion statistic screens. Uh,
Right.
at at the casino game job, I mean, I had to learn all sorts of interfaces. I had to learn just your main game screen, which has the reels and the buttons at the bottom and like the your little meters and stuff. And then bonus games. And
Yeah.
you had bonus games that are like picking games, bonus games that have spinning wheels, bonus games that have all sorts of different visual stimuli. And it can't, and again, like especially in a casino game, you're building a hierarchy of information because that's essentially what a pay table is. Like, oh, I'm not excited about, you know, like three little frogs landing, but if I hit the golden frog, I know that one's more valuable, just as a terrible example. But like everything
Yeah.
about that screen that you're looking at top to bottom is information hierarchy, right? Now,
Yep.
casino game players don't think about any of that, right? But when you're building a casino game, it's a very conscious, intentional design visually, and that visual design is constantly touching on UX and the emotional experience and stuff. And so it's interesting. Like I immediately devalued casino gaming before I worked in it, because I'm like, oh, that's shitty. That's a sin industry. It's not. There's no value in that. I'm going to be laughed out of my
Right.
career, But on the contrary, I actually think it was the rocket ship that got me to be a good UI guy and a UX guy better than any college course could have ever given me, right? Because I was making something real. But yeah, and I did that for 7 years, and to the point where I got to the point where I was designing games. I wasn't just given designs. I was going out there. I was pitching, man. I was going into boardrooms with like the suits and everything like that, and I was pitching an idea, and I was getting it approved. I have a few patents, like I have a few patented innovations that some of these games afforded, and me and other co-authors are on patent. So it's like I have so many good vibes about that first job, but ultimately I my heart really wasn't in casino gaming. I wanted to make not, it's so unfair to call them real games, but like I wanted to make games that I could share with more people outside of just casino destinations. So I left that company and I actually stopped doing art for about 5 years because I left that company to go. I was the game manager and creative director of a company called Game Salad, and it's a game engine that required no code. It's really cool engine. A lot of other engines do that, like a Construct, and I want to say even Game Maker probably has some visual scripting components. But basically, I got so invested in the design and in the creation of games that I wanted to work at a company where like that was their thing. So I led a game team where we put out games constantly using this engine, and we got to kind of like test new features and stuff like that. It's just interesting how you go from like just being an artist to then leading other creative people. So that was interesting, and how you learn to separate yourself. Because I missed it. I wasn't doing art for like 5 years, but I got jealous of like the other artists that did. Really, really roundabout way to say like, how it got back to like Artcraft Entertainment on Crowfall and Airship Syndicate. Eventually I just knew that, I think art was just something I wasn't going to give up. I think, I'm still leading teams and stuff, but like I'm, in the situation where I can continue to contribute my art to the product, and it's not just wireframes and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things I wanted to circle around with, just with you, with the points you made. One I wanted to talk about was, I think a thing that comes across very common in a lot of students I talk to is what I call decision paralysis, where they're so afraid of making a decision about what they want to focus on, and I'm very guilty of this. You never start. right? And you talk about like you didn't just start, you rolled continuously until you just made 1,000 things. So that's one part. And then the second part on top of that is my designer in visual development school told me that there is no boring projects, only boring designers. When you talk about like I worked in casino games and people would think it's this or that, is that, you know, it doesn't have to be a boring experience. You make it boring if you think it's boring. If you're excited about what you do and excited about the project, then you'll bring that to the project and make it exciting. But if you approach something like, you know, like a logo for something that seems like, oh my God, it's a, you know, it's like a law firm or whatever the fuck. Yeah, it might be a law firm, but you can still make it jump. So those are the two, like the fear paralysis and boring designers is something I think I picked out of those two. I think we talk about those a bit more, especially the fear paralysis, because I know you were shaking your head, agreeing me with that it's something you know that's very common.
I think, you know, it could still happen, you know, as your career progresses. But really, the first one's the hardest, you know, because you don't want to make a mistake. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I think even labeling something a mistake is by placing expectations on something that I think are limiting, right? You say, hey, I mean, I've done this when I was young. I said, hey, man, by the time I'm 30, I'm going to be a millionaire. Just some bullshit goal, you know? Like, hell, I would have loved to have been a millionaire at 30, I'm sure. But even if I was a millionaire at 30, I bet you I would have been a huge douchebag about it. You know what I mean? I actually I really enjoy how things are going right now. I think things have landed really, really nicely in place. But, you know, early on, you just haven't been around long enough to really know what success looks like. And you might be right. You might set out to make that $1 million. You get your $1 million and you feel great and you're validated because you knew it was possible and you went out and you got it, right? But for a lot of people, that's just not realistic, right? Or saying, hey, you know, trust me, I have met many, many artists like this. If I don't work at Blizzard, I'm a failure. If I don't work at Riot, if I don't get to do a Hearthstone card, then I suck as an artist, or I have failed, or I've, you know, or I'm not working hard enough, you know, and
yeah,
that is, I think, that's not a very. I mean, it's great to say, hey, I would love to paint at the quality of a Hearthstone card. I would love to paint at the quality. Magic the Gathering, a lot of Magic the Gathering guys that really, really want to do any kind of work for that, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a noble goal to want to paint at that caliber, right? But then to put this is the thing, right? You can't control everything. You can control what you do, what you choose to do, and how you choose to feel about what life throws at you, right? But you can't control if the Hearthstone people contact you back. In fact, the more you push, the more likely they won't contact you because they don't want to work with needy people like that, right? They want to work with you know, proven, you know, people who are accessible, people who are proven, and also people who aren't going to be trouble because they're running a business, right? Remember that this is a business. This is not built to put you on a pedestal so that you can feel good about yourself. You need to learn how to feel good about yourself without that type of reward at the end. Because guess what's going to happen? You might actually get contacted by the Hearthstone people and you're like, oh my God, I can't wait to draw, you know, like my favorite character. And they're going to ask you to draw a potion bottle. You know what I mean? And you have to be okay with like saying, hey man, I'm in the ballpark of this, you know, this arbitrary goal I made, but I'm in the ballpark and like, dude, I'm recognized for my talent. Now, no, I didn't get to be the rock star that I was really hoping I could get to be, but like, it should still feel really satisfying. Like for instance, God, this is funny because I feel like I've gone through my own journey of doubt and self value and stuff.
This is good though. This is good stuff though.
I think where a lot of this is coming from, you know, like I'm not just spouting off crap. I mean, I've gone through this myself, right? Which is why I'm bringing it up. But even like I've done a lot of logo work because, you know, part of the UI design and stuff that put me on a path to be a good, like for instance, sorry, I completely skipped over this. Like, you know, I can make an entire career just on being a branding guy, a logo guy in branding. And I learned that at the casino game company too. Why? Because every single game, and I made at least 12 unique games a year, right? Unique IP. Every single game required IP development and it required a logo, a full-on developed logo, right? And I learned how to be so efficient at making logos, a lot of different tricks on how to modify existing type, or quick ways to make your own custom type and stuff like that. So again, I didn't learn that in college. I didn't set out to learn that. It was a byproduct of being in the right place at the right time. Where my art director, who was a former marketing guy who used to cut fonts out by hand with an X-Acto knife, like in the pre-digital era of typography,
Wow.
he showed me all this stuff. Again, I never knew that I was going to learn that when I was looking at the job application of casino games, right? But look at all the value that came because I took that leap, right? So
Yeah.
So I do logos all the time. One of my most frequent freelance requests is logo design. I did the logo for the Netflix Castlevania show, just came out called Blood of Zeus, Seis Manos. I got to refactor the Darksiders logo. I've touched a lot of different logos and stuff. And I'll say for a while there, I used to feel really bad because I'm like, yeah, that's my logo up there, but someone else did that really badass key art. I started to feel like again, like the Hearthstone potion illustrator who really wants to, draw characters, right? And it took a while for me to give myself perspective and be like, dude, no, that everyone sees the logo too. That logo is actually more distributed than even the key art. That logo is key. It's pivotal.
Yeah.
It isn't exact. I still to this day would love to be the key art illustrator. Who wouldn't, right? The key art is super fun, or Riot splash art. You know what I mean? It's so good. But you learn to just love that you get to play this sport and you get to be in the park with the rest of the people playing this sport. And no, you may not be playing the position that you think you want, but you're probably playing the position that makes the most sense and will bring you the most joy. I'm telling you, if you just get out of your own way and kind of let things kind of organically happen, you're probably going to find yourself in the right place for you. And so it's incredibly optimistic. Hopefully, people don't call me out on how naive that sounds, but it has been my experience. It has been my experience that the best things have happened when I've gotten out of my way by removing arbitrary goals, right? Because you can't control being a Hearthstone artist. You can control being a good painter, and you can control communicating with other people in that community.
Yes.
If you get known for being a chill artist with talent, it kind of opens the door up for a lot of opportunities. But if you go out there knocking on the door, demanding to be let in, guess what? You're not. It's a hard discipline to learn.
Yeah. I think, you've definitely touched on something I think even I've been through myself, is the fact that, Hearthstone and Magic and a lot of those and Riot are big tent poles for people to aim for, or big targets. And, some of the most successful people I know, or some of the happiest people I know in the industry, work in smaller companies doing smaller projects. But what they're happy about is they get to be a creative and they get to be paid as a creative. Like their full-time job is, I draw things and I get paid to do that. They don't really care the fact that, if they got to work in Hearthstone or something, well, that's great. But they do get to be creative for a living and get paid for it. So to them, it's like, well, I've already achieved it. I've already got the thing I wanted. I wanted to be able to draw for a living and get paid for it. So that's already accomplished. It doesn't matter that I'm not working at Blizzard or Riot. It just matters that, I get to get up every day and do the thing I love for a living. So it's the same for me. When I initially got in the industry, I was like, oh, cool, I want to work for Blizzard and Riot and other game companies. But then, along the way, because those aren't the first destinations for a lot of people, those are the jobs you get when you're in your 40s and stuff like that. And of course, now you're in airship, so it's a thing where now people are like, oh, I'd love to work in airship. That's a dream for me. So, everything's about perspective. I think it's just about framing your expectations and trying to be defining every day what success is for you, right? That's definitely something, or kind of what you're trying to say.
Well, also, I think, at least for me personally, it's a double-edged sword. It's a bit of a trap to put your success on, again, like a specific creative target. If I if I die and I never did like a piece of key art for one of our products, and I won't be happy. Like I think that's a trap. It's bad. I mean, it's nice to go after things like that, but find happiness outside of the work too, because sometimes the work, even if it's great, I mean, here's the crazy thing. I worked on logos for big brands that I've been miserable at. Like, I was not passionate about the brand. It was miserable to work with the client, but I get to put it down on my resume and it looks really sexy to, people who weren't part of the process. But in my mind,
Right.
the thing that other people would celebrate is something that's actually almost like a warning not to go down that path again. It's like, hey, value good clients, value good collaborators over the perception or prestige of the thing.
Right.
And it's nice. It's humbling, and it kind of, again, it makes you approachable. I think being approachable opens up a lot of doors. It doesn't mean you have to be agreeable with everything. It doesn't mean you have to be a pushover, but it does mean that people go out there and just they go out there and then they project a lot of like restrictions. Don't talk to me if you're if you're not going to agree with me on this political point, then fuck you. If you don't like this, then blah blah blah. If you play this game, then you have no taste. People go out there and they basically they constantly push people away without even realizing. Right? They think they're defining their personal brand so that they only attract the audience that they want. But here's another thing about the audience. Right? If you're trying to get a specific audience, they're not going to come. You have to just, ask any person who has a restaurant or a store. You have to build a place that's inviting and a place that people want to be at. Not, sure, some places can get away with being so exclusive. Think of like a country club, but that's a douchebag place. Who wants to go to that, right? If you're making a place for people, you want to make it inviting. You want to almost take yourself out of it a little bit and just make it more of just like a place where we can, have some common ground. Differences are fine, but that's, we're here to form a community. And I think it's about opening doors, not shutting them. And I think that's also what allows people to then celebrate other people, right? If you're so self-centered and so concentrated on your own success, it makes it really, really hard to create opportunities for your own success because you aren't, again, focusing on other people around you who are also doing exciting things. Hey man, I'm like, man, this is funny. Like and we can keep talking about this too. I feel like we've turned into a self-help, which is fine, man. I listen to a lot of, motivational speakers and stuff of different types too. I like to hear different points of view, because it gets you thinking, it gets you reassessing and reevaluating where you are. And it also a lot of times leaves you feeling like, dude, things are pretty good. Things are okay. I think I'm bringing a lot of expectation and pressure to my career right now when it doesn't. Because I meant to as a continuation of like, I hated this one gig or whatever. Like, guess what? You're going to go through periods of your career that aren't fun at all. Like, it's going to be hard. Like, it isn't. You don't get to a place where, and it's funny. You acknowledge Airship. In my being there as this triumph, and it's a personal triumph, but at the same time, it's not something that like I feel like, okay, I've actually hit my destination and now life's done, I can die happy. I mean, I could, but like now I have new goals. It's just an eye-opening thing, like you get to the place where you want to be and you don't change as a person. You think, oh, I'm at Blizzard now, so I'm a great artist. Guess what? You were a great artist before you were at Blizzard. You know what I mean? You get to Blizzard, and to be honest, 9 times out of 10, you get a little shell-shocked at how it's not at all what you thought it was going to be. Airship, it's not what I thought it was going to be in certain ways, but it's so much more than I expected in many, many other subtle ways. And a lot of it comes from the fact that we're a small team. Everyone's highly motivated. Everyone's highly talented. And it's a group of people who are not egotistical, right? And that comes from the top. Joe is one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life, and he's very supportive. And he doesn't, he's not like other creative directors that I've worked for that really make the product a lot about them and their spotlight. In fact, it's amazing to see how many times Joe steps out of the way to let someone else take the spotlight. And I think that's great, great leadership. I never would have expected that, just considering what I had built him up to be from being a fan as a kid, and being him being kind of a role model for what I wanted to be going into my career. And you meet him, and you're just like, it's nothing at all like what I expected, but it's so much better. And so, but yeah, you're going to go through periods of hardship. Things are going to be tough. It's not great all the time. And that's why you have to have a strong foundation of like, okay, cool. I'm not in this to get 1,000 likes on my next piece that I post. I'm not in this to be a name. I'm in this to just work. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to train. I'm just going to spend this year. It's totally fine if, everything I do flies under the radar. There's going to be a next year. There's going to, it's like I said, it's a marathon. It's about persevering, right? And the people that I think can last the longest in this industry are the ones who like don't give up when things get slow or when things get hard, or where you don't have that like social positive reinforcement loop. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people do. They post on Instagram every single day, and I bet you some of those people start to worry if like towards the end of the week they see a downward trend on engagement with their pieces. And they start to really think that it's something they did. They really make it about themselves. Oh man, what am I doing wrong? Am I not cool anymore? What happened, right? Remember, man, people have lives. You might have dropped some content on the week that some global disaster hit that you weren't really paying attention to. And people just don't have the time to look at Instagram for like they did the other day, or like, Disney just dropped a new show and everyone's talking about that right now. And, or people doing the fan art chase. Oh shit, I better do some Falcon and the Winter Soldier fan art because right now it's really hot, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, man, it's a trap. Sometimes you have to be okay.
I think it's also,
go for it.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's hard as well when you're in the position you're in as well, because maybe a part of that came from like, when you were thinking about what's a success, what's not a success, it was probably because also you were doing UI as opposed to, like you said, you wanted to be the guy who was doing like the key splash art or stuff like that.
Sure.
Like, I think it's also a team effort where, like, I know I've experienced that in game jams. Like recently when I've done these game jams where we've made like Calamity and Tomato Mare, like they won a bunch of awards. And it was funny because when I went to Lightbox and I was there with Raph and a couple of the guys with Sony Santa Monica, I was being like gushing like, oh, God of War was like one of my games of 2018. It was so incredible. I really, really loved it. And every time they were kind of like, yeah, man, like it was a real team effort. Like that whole studio is incredible. And you were kind of thinking to yourself at one point, I was like, they're giving the whole, PR speech, like, it was a team effort. But then when we were getting interviewed after we won a bunch of awards on Tomato Mare, there was only 3 of us. And people obviously first in those games always see the art, right? They always see the things jumping about or the buildings. People are like, oh my God, your art was so good. And I won a bunch of awards for the art. And I was like, look, man, like my art is nothing in comparison to the coders who worked on it, who made it actually move. Like if they didn't animate it and make the things work, then you'd just be looking at a bunch of boxes. And they were like, oh yeah. And I was like, yeah, it was a real team effort. And I caught myself saying it. So it's like, even though I was in one position, I still got to be part of the hurrah about the game. But it's the same with you, Airship, right? You might think to yourself, I'm only the lead UI UX guy. But then people are like, oh my God, you worked in Battlechasers, you worked in Darksiders. Like, and Darksiders has this huge legacy as well. So,
I'll also, I'll say too, anytime I fall into that trap of thinking, oh man, I'd be happier if I wasn't doing UI and UX and I was doing more of the concept or illustrating. I just remind myself, like, it's just like you said, like the art would be nothing without the animation, or like the art really has no purpose if there's no context for it in the design of the product, right? And so here's the thing that I didn't really touch on that much, right? Like, I don't love UX because I love UX, like just in and of itself. I think it's interesting. Like, I actually think like coming up with that, again, like that emotional roller coaster of the game experience. I think that's really, it's cool and it's satisfying on its own. But the real motivation, the real reason why it is my career, and it is the thing that defines a lot of my work, most of my work, is how core UX is to the product, like vision and product, like the metal. You know what I mean? Like our modelers,
Hmm.
our environment guys, those guys are great. You know what I mean? But they're not
Yep.
designing the systems. They're not creating the role playing game that's happening in the 2D space where I live. You know, and so
Yeah.
they're creating all this great moment to moment content, but I'm creating the glue that's holding it together. And so that means I am on a daily basis. I'm talking with all the leads. I'm talking with the owners. I'm talking with almost every other discipline in the studio about the different things that are going on, because it all ties into how the UX facilitates connecting the dots. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like, there's so much influence and there's so much gratification in being that facilitator, that again, like, it's hard to describe, because tell you what, hardly any other discipline has that type of engagement with the other disciplines, right? Like combat guys are going to talk to programmers, because obviously, those things happen in tandem, but those guys aren't always really talking to, like, the marketing people or the 3D modelers, or even our production staff. So it really is, it's a point of privilege. I get to see a lot. I mean, basically, I get to see behind the curtain from day one. In fact, a lot of times I'm the guy doing the graphics for the pitch that we shoot off to publishers before the rest of the studio even knows that we've pitched something to publishers. You know what I mean? Like there's a what's the word? There's a level of access I get as a UX designer that hardly any other person at the studio gets. And so that is the thing that has been really, really fun and enjoyable, because it's almost like you get to be like in on like a little secret, and you build up all this like anticipation for when it hits, when it gets revealed, whether internally to the team or externally to the consumers. Like, it's just this pop of excitement because you were there every step of the way. And so it's super rewarding and satisfying. If I could say, like, it's cool making games, but like, I've been doing that for so long that doesn't have novelty anymore. The thing that still really makes me excited about making games, especially from the UX perspective, is that collaboration and that closeness to the metal. Like, there are times that, like, I'll get a design and I'll shoot out a mock-up of something that has something that wasn't in the design that everyone likes so much that it becomes part of the design. And now I've etched my contribution into the core product henceforth, right? Like, it's incredibly satisfying. So yeah, I don't mean to like say, yeah, I'm willing to take a second place ribbon because I'm not doing key art. Like, I don't want that to be the sentiment here at all. Like I love having the first place ribbon in UX. And it's almost like a childish dream I'm still holding on to like illustrate, but I'm doing that too. I'm just not doing it at Airship. I actually have quite a lot of personal illustration work that I've done for like books and book series and stuff. So it's not like I'm not scratching that itch. It's just, there are still those days when I'm like sitting 2 feet away from like Joe. Would have been kind of cool to like do some art, but whatever, man. Like, I think I'm closer to that dream I had when I was a kid than I ever thought I'd be. I mean, shit. Even little milestones like doing like the Castlevania logo. Like, it's just one of those things. It's a game I grew up playing, and I love that series, and just like contributing even this tiny bit to it. I mean, like the guys over at Powerhouse Animation, they're the ones doing the heavy lifting, right? They're the ones doing all the work. I get to do this tiny little thing and ride those coattails. And it's just like, dude, if the 12-year-old me knew what was going to happen, he wouldn't believe it. He'd blow his mind.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's interesting where I think there's definitely. Cheers to that. But I think there's an interesting fact in that fact that when you showed me the Castlevania LP, I was like, holy shit, like your logo's on that as well. And like, I remember when I first saw the previews for Castlevania, I was like, and I'm not just saying this obviously because you're sitting here. Honest to God, the truth of the matter is, I looked at that logo reveal and I was like, that's a nice fucking logo. That is a nice, because obviously coming from a design and a typography background, I was like, Jesus, that's a really nice logo. And like, that's the fact. It was a meme on Facebook, and it was an illustration of how we perceive our art as to how the public perceives it, where like the guy comes and there's a huge, magnificent cake on the table, and the guy's bringing a cake to the table also, but the cake isn't, it's no 3-tier, it's no super fancy, and it's like, oh man, that guy's cake looks so much better than mine, and he puts the cake down. And then the guy comes over to eat it, and he's like, "Fuck yeah, man, 2 cakes." You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, like you're sitting going like, I only got to do the logo. But for me, like, that was one of the defining things about that series was how the logo stood out, especially when you go to Netflix, right? Because Netflix sticks with the thumbnails, and you're looking at it, and it's so prevalent in
my god, it's surreal. Here's what's crazy. I actually get uncomfortable sometimes when I see it. Because it's almost like I'm still I don't know, it's big, it's Castlevania, but again, my life didn't change. I am not a different person. It's almost like I don't want to look at it too much, because I don't want to start thinking about it differently, because when I look at this logo, I don't think about what other people look at it. I actually think about making it. I think about, and thank you for commenting on liking the design. You would laugh if I showed you the first draft. So the story, there is a story behind the logo, right? And I like to think, they didn't pick me because I'm a great logo guy. They picked me because I'm a bit of a Swiss Army knife, and they had a week to deliver a logo. So I think I was like just a fixer. Like I'm not, again, like they didn't pick me because I'm some hotshot logo maker. They just picked me because I'm affordable and available. I've worked with Powerhouse for
but see, that's you putting yourself down again. But I bet you they picked you because they loved your artwork.
Well, tell you what, there you go. That's my own perception, and I'm probably wrong. And I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sid. Thank you. 5 days. They gave me 5 days to get. I think they contacted me on 1 week. They contacted me on a Friday.
Right.
And they said they would have details for me on a Monday. So of course that weekend I started putting together doodles and stuff like that. I hadn't seen one frame of the show, so I had no idea what the tone was, but I'm like, okay, cool. And my original design was based on the classic Castlevania design, so like it was a lot more like Old English looking and really kind of ornate. And Monday comes around, and then they give me the details and they give me the tone, and I was completely off. Like basically, they saw my first draft and they're like, no, don't. Like we're going to ignore that right now because that is so off the mark. We don't want to be distracted. And they're just like, no, it's an anime. They want it to, but it's like gritty. They were like, we want it to feel like Dark Souls. We want it to feel like Berserk. We want it to feel like those really gritty Japanese shows, right? And so I actually had a couple drafts of the logo. It wasn't too different from the final one, but it also incorporated Japanese characters, right? And in fact, I should dig those up and just share them like on social, because like what are they going to do? Who cares, right? The thing is such a thing now. It's not giving away anything that at one point we had different designs. But it was such a roller coaster, and that's what I'm saying. When I look at that logo, I don't think of the show at all anymore. I actually think of the real accomplishment was going from one Friday to the next Friday with zero, almost even less than zero, because I was going in the opposite direction that I should have been. But like going from nothing to having the final logo. They didn't make any edits to it. They didn't say, okay, cool, this is nice for now, but we're going to go with something final later with a different artist or whatever. No, like from one Friday to the next Friday, about 5 iterations, we came up with the final one, and it shipped. And like that's the kind of stuff that like I still have chills thinking about, because I'm like, how did that even happen? Like, because I had a day job, I had all these other things in my life. I have a daughter. It still happened. Like it still managed to come together. And in the moment, I didn't think at all about it. Yeah, yes, of course. That first Friday, I'm like, hell yeah, Castlevania, I can't believe it. And then it kicked in over the weekend, like, what did I get myself into? Can I do this? It's a big thing. This is actually a lot of weight. Can I even carry it? But the fact that we got to that second Friday and everyone was happy, like that's the accomplishment, And so I don't have as many of those as you might think of, like these, like these crazy, how did it come together? And when it happens like that, those are the times I like. I really like that old school. It's like old school game development too. It's just like, 4 dudes in a closet really just working away, and you don't know what's going to happen, but somehow a game came out. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's even the way, the logo sits. For me, it almost looks handcrafted in the fact that it actually looks like it's been either lino or screen printed. And then, of course, the C, the A, and the S, the flame thing that's going on there as well that leads into the negative colors. Like, I think is something that is almost lost in modern design, and I think it was something awesome that you brought back. And I think the things you're talking about where like, oh, I've done this, I've done that, but then so far in the space of a couple of years, you've worked on Darksiders, you've worked on League of Legends, you've worked on Castlevania and TV shows. Like, you've done a lot in the last couple of years, and I think it's hard because I've done it as well, where you never really stop to look back and see everything you've done that's behind you. You're always kind of looking forward into the next thing. And I think it's only when people like me stop and point it out, you're kind of like, oh yeah, like I've done a lot with my life in the last couple of years. That's quite impressive. But it's hard, especially for me, when I got to a point when I was getting down on myself the last couple of weeks, people were like, well, you left your job at 28 with no guarantee you were going to do anything. You've worked on video games, you've got your degree, you've been able to speak to all these guys, you've had this podcast for these couple of years, you've been all around the world meeting people. So you're kind of like, oh, okay, there's merit to what I've done. But it is hard when you're sitting as yourself trying to think about, people always say that you shouldn't compare yourself to other people. You should compare yourself to an old version of yourself. Like, where were you 6 months ago, 2 years ago? What were you like then? What are you like now? And how do they compare? Which I think is very apt, right? It's probably something you go through daily, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to even address what you were talking about, how like, you struggle sometimes when things just aren't landing or happening when you think they should or as fast as they should.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing. Just take that time box off of it, right? And again, there could be a fallacy with how your story right now is I quit my job at
Mm-hmm.
28. Quit my job at 28
Mm-hmm.
and I started a fresh start at 28. You know what I mean? And just even that tone feels like you're saying I reset the clock at 28 and look at all this time that I've lost. And it's like, no, not at all, man. You were 28. You've got a lot of experience that you're bringing with you as you shift your focus. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
I said, it's not chasing a dream is you're not going to catch that dream. It's not something to catch. It's just how you've changed your focus. Right now, your focus is on game development, is in art, and it's just it's a treadmill, man. You're never going to get as good as you want. And you're probably always going to find flaws in your work, and that's true of every artist. You know what I mean? Like, I don't believe an artist that looks at their work and say, yeah, that's the best I'll ever do. Like, it's never. There's always going to be something that you knew that you had to make a compromise on, and it becomes a starting point of your next piece, right? Like, okay, this is the thing that I failed on, through my own personal criteria, and so now this becomes the next thing that I work on, and really, it's the work that you have to love. Like, if you love the work, then really, like, it means that you'll have longevity, and then the success will come. Let's go back to the casino days. Here's another thing I learned about through working at a casino game company, right? All right, so the way that a lot of these slot machines work is, let's say in the math design of a slot machine, you have a set amount of money that the game is allowed mathematically, balanced to give the player. But so some players walk away from the machine rich. Other players walk away and they've sunk hundreds of dollars in, right? But it's all fair math. It's all fair odds and stuff. And so it's really, you're just playing the numbers, right? Yeah. And like anyone who plays the numbers, you can't predict what the numbers are going to do with any accuracy. You could just try to, be in the right place at the right time. But really, how do people with money make money? They just have money, and then they make their bets and they let it sit, and they accumulate. Sorry. So going back, the way that money was distributed in the game, very, very little of the money actually happens on the reels, right? 3 kings, you get like, $1.50, right? Where the real money gets distributed is in the bonus games, right? So land, bonus symbol, bonus symbol, bonus symbol, boom, bonus game, right? You got free spins, or you got like a pick 5 of 8 boxes, and there's all different types of bonus games. But the bonus games are where the most money is given. And sorry, I promise you there's a point to this.
No.
How do you get to a bonus game, right? So this is where the math really kicks in. Okay, well, like roughly, 2 to 3 times per $100 you put in the machine, you are pretty much guaranteed. It can actually happen a lot more than that. I've seen people put $20 into a machine and they hit like 5 bonuses, right? So it's just how the numbers play out. What I'm getting at is if you have enough money to put in the machine, you're going to hit a bonus game, right? It's just how the numbers work. And so when it comes to like your career and how you work, if you like working, you'll be able to sustain yourself long enough to actually be in the right place at the right time to hit the bonus game equivalent of your career, that next job opportunity, that next thing, right? If you quit before that day happens because you have labeled yourself a failure or labeled yourself not cut out for this thing, or like, I changed my mind, I'm going to do this other thing because I can get to my return on investment faster, right? Well, then obviously you're never going to hit the bonus game, right? Because you've basically taken your money out of the machine. So, the art of actually being a profitable gambler, especially if you're doing slots, is you pick your machine and you stick to your machine. If you take your money out because it's not going your way and you go to a different machine, then you've basically just robbed yourself of the opportunity to hit the bonus game on that next spin. You know what I mean? So it does apply. And actually, I mean, like I said, I don't want to come off sounding too positive or naive about things, but that's definitely what my experience has been. Is you just put, when things aren't hitting, you put your head down and you just focus on your work, whether it's for 1,000 people or just for yourself, because it's what you like to do, right?
Yeah.
Getting acknowledgement for your work, that's awesome, but it's not what I like. I like making things, right? And so if you just keep making stuff and you like podcast included, man, like this is awesome. I love that you've given me a platform. Obviously I like talking and telling stories. More so than anything else, I like to maybe there's someone listening right now who's in a similar spot, right? Or who's halfway to the career that they think that they want. They're in the industry, but they're not exactly where they want to be and they don't know where to go next. Like I would love it if even just one person connected with anything I've said. That makes me feel happy.
Yeah.
And so, you're on my radar
I'm connected
now.
with what you're saying.
Huh?
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm connected with what you're saying. So yeah.
But the more you put yourself out there, you're actually doing the work. Even if right now you're not creating a piece of art or whatever, you're doing the work to create relationships. You're already one step closer to getting to that next step. Yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm super excited.
Yeah, I mean, people even talked about. I mean, somebody put it into perspective the other day where I was like, because sometimes I don't value the thing I do, which you think is awesome. But then people were like, well, if you think about it, man, there's maybe only like 3 people in the world right now who are doing art podcasts specific to maybe like the games or concept industry, and you're giving us a platform to speak. If you went away, that takes it to 2. And then it's even less likely people will get a platform to speak. So he's like, and again, this is me tooting my own horn, but like it did put it in perspective where I was like, oh, like something I'm doing is actually worth something. It's it's making people happy. And like, man, I've had emails from people like, so 2 examples. I had an email last year for somebody in Australia. If you're listening, hello. And he sent me an email saying that he was leaving his job because I inspired him to go to art school. And I was like in tears reading that email, like this whole 2 or 3 paragraphs about you really gave me the courage to do it and step up. And I was like, Jesus Christ, man. And then 2 was when I was at Lightbox in 2019 and I was at Raph's booth. I was getting approached by people who were like, oh my God, I recognize your voice. I listen to your podcast all the time. Even freakier than that, I was on a flight from Chicago to LAX. I was ordering a drink and the guy next to me was like, are you Gordon Neal, by the way? I was like, yeah. He's like, oh, dude, I fucking love your podcast. And I was like, oh my
That's
God,
cool.
like, what a moment. Yeah, but like, that's the stuff that keeps me wanting to just keep pushing forward. And, I always think that like I maybe haven't got a strong will of determination, but people also talk about like how driven I am to just keep going forward. And I think it's like you said, if I do something that inspires at least one person, then like mission accomplished, right? That's yeah.
And also, here's something that I don't know you think of or may or may not blow your mind, but like almost like how I set out to do one thing, but then UX became my calling. Like
Mm-hmm.
You switch careers to games, and it's entirely possible that you switch careers again to something else. That this podcast and this effort is growing towards something even more aligned to who you are than even your own goals in the video games industry. So I think really the
Yeah.
key takeaway here is to just be open, man. Just to be open and let cool things happen to you. And the best way to do that is to, not to put so much pressure on yourself for a specific outcome, for a specific goal. Like, sure,
Yeah.
pressure yourself to have good habits, sleep, get good sleep, train, stick to your, commitments and stuff like that. Those are all good habits to have. Spend time with people that encourage you. All that stuff's really good. But those specific like creative goals that almost feel like an ultimatum. If this doesn't happen, then I can't move forward in my career. Like, that stuff's a trap. You can't really think like that. But yeah, so it's just really like, be open to allowing cool things to happen. And the coolest things that happen are the ones that you don't expect or don't control. It's just like, oh crap, how did this just fall in my lap? Yeah, I'll do this, little project. Or, here's an opportunity for me to learn something that I can definitely reapply or reinvest into my overall goal. That's a cool diversion as well. And that may not have happened had you been, I guess, too restrictive on yourself.
Yeah, I think it was even interesting when I turned to doing game jams at one point, because, it was something that wasn't even on my radar, and I thought to myself, well, why would I want to do that? Because how is that going to help me? Or, how is making like a small indie game with a team of 2 people? But then on those 2 projects, when I worked with the team I worked with, like with Sean and Adrian and eventually John as well, like I learned so much about engine work, working with a team, delivering stuff through different like cloud mediums. And then, of course, how to ship a final product, how to do key art so that you had logos and stuff. And I had to do a bit of logos myself on Tomatomare and some UI even at that point. The UI wasn't fabulous, but like it was still there. And like, yeah, like that was a learning experience I never thought I would have, but I did. So I think, like you said, being open is the key thing, because you think to yourself like, oh, well, this isn't doing Hearthstone cards for Blizzard. Well, do you get to be creative and you're getting paid for it? Yeah, well, then take it as a positive thing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think what we'll do as well now, Billy, is maybe shift into your day-to-day or things that would be more specific to UI, UX. So yeah, Billy, so you're getting back to the more technical aspect of what you do for a day job, and leaving the kind of motivational stuff behind. UI UX, I think to people, because it's such a niche in the industry, is maybe lost on like where you take that artistically. So what is your app suite like? Are you in Adobe most days? Do you work with 3D programs? How do you animate or build your flowcharts? Kind of
Sure.
take us through your typical thing, your workflow.
I'd say it does run the gamut, and it kind of depends on what type of visualization you need to do. It does go everything from like vector art in Adobe Illustrator to just quick and dirty pencil sketches in Photoshop to interactive mockups with Adobe XD. Sometimes all the way, especially if it's like a dimensional UI, something that is going to be projected in a 3D space. There is an opportunity sometimes to do full on 3D rendering and 3D pre-visualization. I can go into each one of those. So
yeah,
from a day-to-day breakdown, I'd say that my primary tool is Adobe Illustrator, and it has been since the casino game days, because at that time a lot of our art had to be both purposed for digital display, but also for physical printing, right? Printed reel tapes, printed signage, and stuff like that. So, from a production standpoint, it made sense for things to be resolution independent and print ready. And vector is that. There's no pixel scale to a vector image, and so just out of necessity, I had to learn Illustrator. But at this point, Illustrator is the tool that I'm just the fastest in. Even coloring comics, like I'll actually take the line art into Illustrator. I don't vectorize the line art, but what I do is I create all my flats, all my basic shading and everything like that as vectors, so that I can export them back out at a huge resolution for the final brushwork and stuff that I do in Photoshop, right? So Adobe Illustrator is my main tool, and I love to use it. I can just get to the end and I can move things around so quickly, right? So what I have to do almost every day is like my primary product that I make is pre-visualization. Right, we have enough people on the team now where we actually have other folks that build stuff out in Unreal or actually develop out all the graphic, all the final graphic designs and stuff. But what I do is I'm doing concept art, but in the UX UI space. I'm pre-visualizing a screen so that for instance, so that our designers can look through it and say, hey, those are all the features that we want, and programmers can look at it and say, okay, cool. Not only do we need all this data to be tracked under the hood, but now we also have to kind of create events for when you click this button. This event has to happen in order to tell this part of the game, hey, the players made this choice, and save this data or push it up to, other systems in the game. So what I do is a lot of times what I do is it's almost like a blueprint, right? I'm building the blueprint that everyone can look at, all the different, disciplines and all the different contractors can look at and say, okay, cool. Now we know what the building is that we're building, right? So, so in Illustrator, a lot of times what I'll do is, when I get the basic idea, you build enough skill trees enough to know what a skill tree looks like. You build enough crafting systems that you kind of know what those look like. So if someone just says, hey, we're going to have a crafting system in our game, I say, cool. I actually have about 5 templates in my head that I can start with immediately right now, depending on the fine points. Okay, is it a Minecraft style crafting system where it really is just like, you grab bag of different resources and you experiment and you kind of have this whole like spreadsheet of different, genealogies essentially. It's very freeform. Is it like that, or is it like Horizon Zero Dawn where there's crafting, but it's really just a currency cost? Like, in order to make more arrows for my bow, I just have to have enough of these, base resources, and then I hold the X button and I get 5 more. Like, that's a very simple. You might as well go to an NPC and something costs 20 gold. You know what I mean? It's not creative. It's not a creative crafting system, right? So you play enough games, you make enough games to know the different types, the different like flavors of a system. So normally I can get handed a concept, a design doc or whatever, without any visual, and it's just like, okay, cool, it's like this, it's this flavor, and that gets me 50-60% of the way, and then I look at the nuances of it. Okay, actually it's also tied into this character progression system, or it's tied into this like even like world progression, right? Like this tree on your, like this sphere, this is all theoretical, right? But like this sphere on the skill tree doesn't become available until this narrative moment, right? So like we start to pick apart the nuances, right? So I just blank canvas in Illustrator. I start putting down boxes and shapes, right? And so anyone who does UX probably works this way too. Programmers make flowcharts work this way. Shapes mean something, right? So if I have a clickable button, right, that's a square or a rectangle. It's blocked off, right? If I have something that's supposed to be static information, like basically squares mean something, triangles mean something, circles mean something, and even colors, right? Muted colors are non-interactive, static, passive elements. Bright colors, those are interaction points, right? So I basically heat map, this doesn't sound very sexy, but I heat map out the screen, and even from the heat map, whether you know what you're looking at or not, your eye already knows where it should be going, right? The hierarchy of information and the implication of how you interact with the screen, that's what the heat map is meant to do. It's, it's the same thing as just, blocking out your silhouette, for a painting, or the rough shape out when you're sculpting in clay, right? You're just basically getting the sense of what the screen's composition is, and it's not based on aesthetics at all. At that point, there's nothing pleasing about it from a visual standpoint. It's really meant to be like, okay, cool. Am I setting the screen up to do what it needs to do from a player interaction or a player information standpoint, right? Have I given enough footprint to your stats so that your stats don't have to be a 10-point font? It could actually be a nice readable 16 or an 18. You know what I mean? Like all those considerations come in. And so from that wireframe, what's nice about Illustrator, especially if you've been using for a while, like, you've got an entire creative suite now to take it to full. And that's what I often do. Once I get my heat map and my kind of wireframe looking like, if I can play it, like, again, going back to how I build things, if I'm looking at that screen and I'm playing a game, I'm on the right track. If I'm looking at that screen and it's just a bunch of boxes and none of it makes sense, I'm still in the process of hashing out that first draft wireframe. But once I have my heat map and I feel good about the game that I'm playing in my head, and this is all by myself, by the way. I mean, I hardly ever send that heat map out to other people because they don't have the same codes that I've created for myself. So they might look at a green square button and not at all know what that means. You know what I mean? Like, no. I'm like, no, that's an XP progress bar. You didn't know that? You know what I mean? Like, I don't expect them to have the same shorthand that I have, right? So I never show the heat map layer to anyone. That's really a personal thing, right? But the thing that becomes the distributable is the next step. This is where I take each one of those really gross primitives and I flesh them out into what it's never the final thing, right? But it is at the level of finish of a final thing, right? A lot of times I don't even bother trying to go through. Like, I mean, I build the brand guides. Like, I'm the guy who builds all that material too. So I know in my heart how something should look. And even then, oftentimes I'm like, well, I don't have time to do that, but I do have time to put a really nice gold trim around this thing so that you understand this is an important element versus this thing that's pushed back in opacity because it's not so important. You know what I mean? So like, I will take it to finished polish in terms of like visual presentation, even if it's not the final art that makes it into the game. Why? Because it gets people looking at the screen to be less distracted by the visuals, and they start thinking about the actual functionality of the screen.
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, I mean, one of the things, I mean, I'm going to send this to you on Facebook, Billy. I don't know if you can see this JPEG that I've sent you, but even just to talk about this page of icons that you've done, and it'd probably be easier if I could just share my screen, but I can't, unfortunately, on the app we're using. But yeah, even just to talk through, like, and I'll share this screen with you guys who are watching on YouTube, but just to walk through, like, even the stuff you've done here, like, so this is stuff you would build primarily in Illustrator as flat shapes and flat colors, and then you're then building this back up in Photoshop as a painting almost there.
Yeah, actually. So let's see here. Some of these, man, I love those icons.
Going back now.
Let's go from the bottom up, right? So we're looking at the Darksiders, Genesis,
right?
Weapons, weapon abilities, and ammo type icons, as well as other character abilities, horse icons. So from the bottom up, so the bottom ones are like 95% vector. Those are like very like they're
right.
Primarily vector, and then I take them into Photoshop and I do some brush work. And then from the top going up, like that is a mix and match. Like, for instance, the chaos form icons, like those started life as vector icons, and then I did some brush work. But things like, for instance, let's see here, like the Void Bomb and the Aether Spark, the two Strife equipment items in the middle there towards the right. Those are actually, I just extracted, like, I mean, sometimes you have to save time. You don't have all the time in the world. So like in that case, I was like, well, listen, if most of these things end up looking painterly at the end of the day or like illustrated at the end of the day, no one's going to care if it was, if it started life as a vector illustration. That's just my own point of pride. No, but like I took some of Baldy's concepts for those things, and I just used the concept art, and then I painted on top of it to give it just a little layer of polish. But yeah, like some of these things started life as a 3D render, and you'd be surprised how much had to get repainted. But like, I mean, like if I have a 3D model of the crossblade, there's no need for me to like hand draw that thing from scratch. I'll bring it into Photoshop, right? And then I'll like knock it down. I'll try to knock it down, because a lot of times the 3D renders, right, the textures get a little grungy, especially at a high resolution. So most times I have to like either use a median or like a surface blur or something just to kind of knock it back. But most times I just take it as a silhouette and I almost repaint it on top. But that's just a time-saving measure. You know what I mean? Battlechasers. Of course. Battlechasers was one of those games where like I don't even remember how it was even possible, but like all the weapon icons, all the gear icons, everything, those were completely done in vector. But yeah, it's like the process. I mean, so that's a different process from like the UX of a screen. When we get to like icons, at that point, it's just eye candy. You know what I mean? Like you're just creating content to put into the vehicle. UX is like designing the vehicle, and like UI is like, I want to actually that's not a good. UI is like what the vehicle is carrying, right? What the vehicle is or the color of the vehicle, or like the decorations. I was going to say the driver, but no, the player is the driver.
Yeah.
But as far as the versatility of the tool, like, yeah, I mean, Illustrator is, like I said, the center point of almost everything I do, just because of, again, that versatility. But yeah, sometimes if it's necessary, I'll, in that previs phase of UX, designing a screen, I'll do some full on like icon illustrations and stuff. And in fact, a lot of times, so I don't know, man, it's part of the process, or part of why I think I have to do that, because again, like a lot of times, UX designers don't take anything to full. They put together a flow or a wireframe, something clickable in various programs, or you can make like interactive mockups, and then it gets handed over to someone else. I just feel like, if I can take it to full and have some examples, some key examples of icons or whatever, what's nice about that is that becomes the shortcut to getting to a style guide, like for icons, for instance.
Right.
If I can pump out 2 or 3 key icons for look and feel, that can get handed off to any artist to work on at any time to flesh them out into the full icon set, right? So there's some benefit to, having some of that upfront development. That way it's not like, okay, cool, we know what the screen does, and now we're going to spend the next month trying to figure out what the visual style is going to be, right? So I just find that in a small team, sometimes you have to find as many cost-saving shortcuts as you can.
Yeah, of course. Well, which I think a lot of people get lost in as well, is that you're in a production environment. It was the same with concept art for years. People started using 3D, started using photo bashing, and then it was, it's cheating, it's not the proper thing. You're not staying, true to the art form. But when you're in those production scenarios, especially in studios, time is definitely money. So anything that can get the job done quicker and convey the idea, and especially concept art initially was always a thing where people were like, the stuff in the art books is the production art, right? That's the promotional stuff. The down and dirty concept stuff is things that, you're never really going to see and nobody ever sees. So it's like, sometimes it's like a half finished drawing, but you're just trying to convey an idea. And it must be the same with icons, right? You don't always have to deliver the super polished stuff that arrives in the book. Sometimes you just have to draw stuff on a napkin or a quick sketch and be like, here, this is an idea.
Oh yeah. And that, I mean, I'm not a very tight sketcher. Like a lot of my, it's why a lot of my concepts are not included in the book. They're not very pretty to look at, but I'll pull out a sketchbook and I'll just do silhouettes. Even if something's going to be fully rendered, a lot of times all I need to care about, especially in the initial design phase, is to make sure that it's readable.
Yeah.
And it's understandable from a graphic design standpoint, because a lot of times our illustrated icons get converted, because once you scale an icon down really, really small, a lot of times it loses its readability because the details aren't intact. And so you have to make like a secondary, like a simple version of the icon, so that it can be a little bit more stylized and a little bit more bulky, so that it can be read at a small scale. So that's where I start with all my icon design, even ability icons. I will go. You could probably see on one of my ArtStation posts, I have like the rough sketches of what another artist, Isabel Grace, did. These fantastic ability icons for War and Strife, and like their different rampage and their different chaos modes. And if you look at the sketches I did there, they're grayscale, and they focus 100% on silhouette. And they use, contrast in the grayscale to imply, okay, cool, here's where we need some effects. Here's the main focus. The black is the main focus. The white is the effects layer that's going to imply the action, or basically the motion line, so that the player understands, is this a defensive or is this an offensive attack? We can have a whole episode on just the process of designing icons, because icons are both a pretty picture as well as conveying information. They really are the true culmination of art and UI and UX.
But
I was just
going to say, like, silhouette. Yeah.
I mean, if it fails to read, as a silhouette, then I there are definitely things that will test this, but most times it will fail with detail. If it can't read as a silhouette, it's
Yeah.
not going to read with detail. You're just going to just keep putting coats of paint over a bad foundation.
Yeah. I mean, like, even I know back in the day when we done design school, I mean, there was times when, because when you open Illustrator, for instance, you've got so many million colors and swatches and Pantones, but, people were like, just make a logo with two colors, just like even grayscale, like black and gray, or black and white, like make something read at that level before you put anything else on top of it, which I think is a good, even for concept stuff, even for 3D stuff, like silhouette is so important because, I was having this talk the other day with somebody from, I forget the company, but we were talking about basically about how people can draw really well, right? People can 3D model stuff to a technical standard that's really amazing. But there's people who do that stuff who still can't design. Like, design is like such a king element that, like, if you don't have that, it doesn't matter really how much you can draw, or you can fake so much of it, but if you can't design something really well, like even those gloves you made, the weapon icons where you've made like the gully gloves, and you've made like 15, 16 iterations of those, you've got to have some kind of design skill to know, and of course you're working with concept, but still you've got to have an idea how the things are going to read for
Well, you're
a
making
distance. So
you're
yeah.
making choices, even if you derive, like a final icon based on some other concept, right? You're making choices. You're making choices as to what's the most important aspect of this design that needs to carry through, right?
Yeah.
'Cause that's the thing. If you're
Yeah.
translating, right, some shit's going to get lost in
Mhm.
translation, and other stuff's going to get added
Mhm.
to make it localized, right, to the place that it's going to
Yep.
be showing up. And so you definitely make choices, right? And so you're right, like you having a good design sense. It's funny. One of the things, not to divulge too many Joe Madureira secrets, but Joe Mad is such a great collaborator and mentor, uh, and his value system is great. It was very eye opening because you'd think like the reason why he would appreciate someone's art would be because the shallow concept, the shallow approach would be like, oh, you appreciate their art because they're a very popular artist, so they must be good, right? So you like them because they're popular,
Right.
right? Or you like them because of some style that they do that you dig or whatever. No, one of the things he keeps coming back is like, I like their choices. What's interesting to him about other artists are their points of view, their choices as a designer. And if you look at Joe's work, Joe is a phenomenal graphic designer. His silhouette work, I mean, so many panels in the Battlechasers series are just nothing but silhouette.
Mhm.
And it's got so much energy,
Mhm.
and it's, I mean, hell, even the first teaser of one of my favorite images of Battlechasers Night War is like Garretsen in like a blue, like monochromatic image of Garretsen in a forest looking at the sword, his main sword, and it's just so moody, but it's just, the silhouette work is just, the graphic design is perfect, right? But anyways, going back to like
Yeah.
appreciating the design and appreciating that even if people aren't like world class artists, their design sensibilities make them world class because they have a point of view that's exciting and unique, or the things that they value generate imagery that is evocative and exciting. And when a video game has to have all that in it, you know what I mean? At least the ones we're trying to make.
Yeah.
We world build, we want to reward the player. Like it's amazing how in other games icons are not rewards, right? Icons aren't treated
Right.
aren't they're not considered a treat. And I get it. There's definitely a place for nothing but flat color. I do it all the time too. I flat shade, just flat color silhouette, like tiny little icons, a skill tree that's nothing but just flat icons, right? But if you look at like a skill tree, the thing of like, first of all, Path of Exiles can be very, very off-putting to some people in terms of just how overwhelming it is. But you look at like their skill tree and you just want to click. You just want to, it looks like little pieces of candy. You just want to engage. And so that's definitely the school that we come from. It's like everything that's on the
Yeah.
screen is just flavorful, and it's a reward. We value your time as a player, and we love what we do, and we're showing it. Every screen has all of us on it, you know what I mean, in terms of like our passion and excitement for just being creators. So our icons are rewards, right? When you see a new action bar come up and it's like all these badass little paintings, like it makes you excited. It makes you excited to play. So like our design philosophy definitely comes from a place where it's not specific to an art style. It's more like specific to a celebration of art appreciation. Right, us as art makers,
Yeah.
the player as an appreciator of art, but we all appreciate games as art, right? And so it's this kind of shared fandom. I think that allows us to make our games feel bespoke and feel like handcrafted.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also interesting where you talked about, you know, the whole design aspect of it. And I think with UX and UI, that definitely is something that's a priority. But then, of course, I think when it comes to building these things, and I think, you know, obviously we talked about it initially when we started talking about the mainstream aspect of user interface and user experience and how you dived, you know, head into that world when you were only 19. And, you know, even when I talked about building UI, you were like, you know, the more you make stuff, you know, you learn different stuff and you learn, you know, the way to create things really quickly because you're testing that stuff in the field. I mean, like, what would you say is, you know, if you were talking to someone getting into the field now, or specifically focusing on, I want to make UX UI for games, would your advice just be, you know, like remake it? Like somebody told me, I remember somebody told me ages ago that a really fun exercise was to take an existing game and remake the UI. Stuff like that. Would that be stuff that you would like early on say would be good?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a phenomenal exercise. I've used a similar one when I was leading a game team at Game Salad. The thing that I would we did trainings. We did online trainings for early game developers. Now this is more centered at like general development as opposed to just UX, but it still applies. This idea that take your favorite game.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
my challenge for these people, like take your favorite classic game, you know, Mario,
Mm-hmm.
Mega Man, Contra, and using game solids to just recreate the first screen, right? And then the thing is, all the things that everyone took for granted, right? That's easy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a waste of time. Why are we going so easy? I'm like, just trust me. So like for instance,
Yeah.
Mario, the first screen or the first like portion of Mario, you're a little guy running.
Okay.
You move a screen forward, and now you've got blocks, right? And you've got a Goomba, and then you hit a pipe. Let's say
Right.
the pipe is the end. The level
Yeah.
doesn't go any further than that. What do you have to do to
Right.
get that far? You have to
Mm-hmm.
build a character that runs. Oh shit, but what are they running on? Okay, I have to build a ground plane. Cool. But he's small and he's able to grow. So now I have to have stateful logic that lets me know that this little guy can have a state where he's a big guy, and if he gets hit, he can become a little guy again. But if he's a little guy and gets hit, he dies. Oh, but what can hit him?
Mm-hmm.
The bad guy. Oh shit. Now I have to have a bad guy with a walking path and logic collision to know that if he touches me in this particular direction, he hurts me. But if I touch him from a
Yeah.
different direction, I hurt him. Oh shit, I can hit a
Yeah.
block from the bottom. If it's a certain type of block, a coin block, it's either a coin or a mushroom's going to come out. Oh crap, that mushroom has motion to it. Oh, these other blocks, if I hit them, they can break, but only if I'm a big Mario, not a little Mario. It's just even that one little screen, right? Oh yeah, I have to have block collision from the bottom and the top. You know that behaves differently depending on where I'm hitting it from. So that one tiny portion would take people sometimes weeks to recreate. And we had pretty decent tools that could allow a developer to create that sequence using GameCell without having to code. But the exercise wasn't the coding challenge. The exercise was the design challenge. Like, how do I
Right.
have all these things that need to talk to one another, speak the same language, and have the intended result? And so um, the exercise to take something that exists and recreate it, especially for UX, is great because it means that, okay, all right, well, let's say an old game is a great example, right? Because the thing about UX is, dude, it's evolving every single day. We have new input mechanisms. We have new accessibility considerations. We've got displays that are in so many different aspect ratios. We've got multi-display. We've got so many considerations when it comes to how people play games, how they experience, how they interact with a product, the input mechanism, stuff like that. That if you look at an old game,
Right. And I actually say, like, pick like an RPG, something with like a meaty screen, a screen that has a lot of information on it. I mean, hell, shit,
Final
even
Fantasy
going,
7 or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I actually think that a lot of their
Yeah.
design was pretty good considering the low resolution. Like
Mhm.
that's another thing too, is like, crap, like, they have such low resolution to work with and so much text that they used abbreviation, they truncated strings, they had a lot of subscreens and
Yeah.
pop-ups, right? They had a lot of solutions that we can work differently today. And that's why it's a great exercise.
Yeah.
Take an old game. I would say, pick something in the pre-HD era, because HD has allowed
Right.
more pixel density, which means we can display more information on screen, and it eliminates some of the solutions that people had to do back then. So I would say go back to when they didn't have those affordances and pick a game that you're passionate about, and yeah, recreate it. Solve the problem your way. Solve it differently with today's technology and today's methodology. Also, another great exercise. Take a game that you love for PC or console and redesign the mobile screen. How does this work without, physical controls, right? How can you make this screen navigate? How do you break the information apart into submenus? What happens when you tap and hold on something? Like, what does that look like? Just seeing how delicious it feels to play like Hearthstone on an iPhone. I spent most of my time playing Hearthstone has been on mobile devices, and I never would have expected that, just because it's so information dense, but they made it work. And that's just a great case study in how you can take something that is very like almost requires a mouse or some physical input to play, and see how they solve the problem. You can get a lot of learning from that. But yeah, take an old screen, recreate it, make it yours. It's a great exercise. You're going to walk away learning a lot, but really, I think the thing that's going to stick with you is the appreciation for how much work that goes into these things. The best UX is when you don't notice, right? But it does. It takes a lot of work to solve problems in a way that people didn't even realize they were there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's really the goal
I think
with
it's
UX.
Yeah. I think it's even like you say, that's the behind the scenes stuff that you never think about. And I know when I got the chance to visit Blizzard in 2019 when I was in LA, Jeremy, who is the outsource manager for Hearthstone, he took me around the whole kind of Hearthstone layout and how they visualize stuff. And he was actually showing me like really early, because the Blizzard Museum at the time was hosting Hearthstone stuff because they change it every so often, and he was showing like all the concepts, and he talked me through like the thought process, and even the fact that like a simple animation, like when you beat somebody, their profile picture or their hero profile thing, like it turns into like, it has all to be light things and it explodes into chunks. That was concepted really early by somebody just drawing like a frame by frame animation of like the thing together, then the cracks appearing, then it just breaking into little bits and flying. And those were things that they had to take into consideration for like, well, how do they know they've beat somebody? Did they just die? Did they flip over? And that was stuff that they had to figure out on a user interface level, because they wanted it to be very readable. Like, oh, I've beat this guy, this thing happens. So yeah, I think that's, like you said, when you recreate stuff, you then jump into design problems a bit. Well, how does that, is it a color that flashes? Does it glow? Like, how does that work? Stuff you have to figure out every day, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And again, things you never would have noticed before. Like you said, the glow, the particle effects, the animated feedback, every once in a while you might see like a little gleam out of the corner of your eye, because the game is reminding you like, hey, this is an important thing. We're not going to be too pushy about it. But every once in a while we'll remind you, and like little things like that. Those aren't happenstance. Those don't just happen as a byproduct of a different choice. Like, those have to get programmed. Those have to get constructed. Someone had to craft that feature, and a lot of times, it's forgivable. It's definitely forgivable when it's the player taking that for granted. What has been really hard, especially since I've been, I want to say, I'm not a UX pioneer in any way, but like being in the UX field before it was really prevalent in gaming, the way it is today, means that I've definitely come across people who didn't understand the value of UX. And so, like I said, the player taking for granted all that effort to make that experience just pop and be really rewarding, you can forgive a player for not noticing that or valuing that. But when like
Mm-hmm.
bosses and other teammates and team members and stuff like think that you're crazy for wanting to have those things in your game because it's going to be a better experience, right? Because they don't value or they don't understand the value. Like that is one of the biggest frustrations. And luckily that's a frustration I do not experience anymore. That was only, I think, present at a time when UX was not a necessity in this industry.
Yeah. I think also people get caught up in their jobs and their jobs being their whole identity. And I think what I loved about you in particular was like, yeah, you do UX, UI, and you have this part of the team where, you know, you're doing a job that isn't like you say, like the rock star stuff, the cover art, the splash art. But then outside of your work, you know, you make games, you do covers and different stuff like with superheroes, and you still draw and illustrate. Like, you know, for me, I was always like, oh, if I do, for instance, if I do UX, UI, or that's like you said, that stops me doing the splash art, that stops me. But then, you know, I know people who have walked into a job as an artist in one area, then moved or changed careers or done something different. Like the great thing about this industry, I think, is that like if you want to move and you want to change up what you're doing, then as long as you're dedicated to the craft and you can do it, then you'll always have those opportunities to move. Like, and then also if you just want to do UX and you want to do that stuff from your day-to-day job, you can do stuff at night. You can make your own comics. You know, like Trent, you talked about, like Trent is an amazing comic artist and somebody I really love, and he, you know, makes video games on the side and comics and doesn't get paid like the same wage he does for like working for Riot or Blizzard, but he doesn't care. Like he does it because he loves it. He does it because it gives him fulfillment outside of his work. And I think that's what I think is great about you, is that you don't let your creativity end at your job. You do things outside of that refill your bar to go back into that.
Yeah, it is great too. And you know, I don't really do UI on the side. I do other things that I don't do at the day job. So it's a really complementary like schedule, right? Of kind of creativity and kind of refilling the batteries and stuff. I also wonder if you know, some folks have to get to the peak of the mountain first before they start to realize that it's become unimportant to them, because now at the top of the mountain, when you get to that Riot or the Blizzard or whatever, you're at the top of the mountain, and now you have this vantage point over everything that's going on, and you know it doesn't feel as rewarding as what it felt like being at the top of the mountain alone versus being down in the village with the people, right? In the peasants, right? Like it's often more fun. It's often more fun to, you know, do work that pleases you versus work that again, like feeds into this identity you've created for yourself. Which, I mean, dude, I'm not. I don't have it all put together. You know what I mean? Like I struggle with stuff all the time. And I love where I'm at, and I could definitely see myself just being at Airship forever, you know? But there's still plenty of times when I'm like, is that it? Is this it? Is this all I'm going to accomplish? I'm like, no, because I mean, Airship itself is still growing. I mean, there's still tons to do at Airship as a company and as an individual. But you know, Airship is a great place. They value our free time too, and they let us do our side projects and stuff. And so, you know, this is kind of a cherry situation where it's like, you know, you have something that's really nice and steady, something that's not even just steady, it's growing, you know, like, you know, we're on the upswing right now. And while also being able to have enough energy and time to explore other creative endeavors. Like, I mean, there's no better place I can imagine. And just to put a point on it, that is not at all what I set out to do when I first started in college or whatever. Like it was just one domino after the other that just fell. And sometimes I try to steer the ship. Other times I kind of just let things happen. And I'm getting better about saying no. I used to never say no. I mean, part of why I have a big body of work is because I say yes to everything. Because definitely during that period when I wasn't doing art full time, or something artistic full time, I just had this desperation to do something creative, and so I would just say, yeah, like going back to like the law firm logo, right? I haven't done a law firm logo, but I've definitely done logos for like housing developments, you know, things that are like the furthest thing from entertainment. But I could use that skill set on something that had a product, you know, and I love creating products, right? But yeah, just having that desperation to do stuff, and then now it's like, you can get a little bit more selective, with what you work on, because it isn't about prestige, and a lot of times it's not. I mean, the money is not the motivator. I'm in a very fortunate position where, like, it's not like I'm grinding to pay the bills. It's more like I get to choose the things that are interesting, and where that takes me is a place that is unexpected, right? I'm working on a logo right now that is very different from any logo I've ever made, and it's for a game studio that's got a very different vibe from any of the game studios I've ever worked for. Just a little indie studio.
Yeah.
And it's getting me out of my comfort zone, and it's getting me to do things that, like, I would not normally do. And it's not a big company. It's not prestigious. I'm not getting any cool points for doing this, but I'm doing it because it's personally interesting, and I like that I can make that choice now. Like, I'm comfortable enough to say no to the big name thing that is going to be a nightmare to work on, and I'm saying yes to the thing that I am going to get personally fulfilled from. So I think that that's very, very important, to get to that place where you don't feel like if you're not succeeding at X, Y, and Z, you're just not happy. I mean, I can't imagine I'll stay here forever. I'm sure at some point I'll get a wild hair about some new crazy goal that's going to make me a mess again. But right now things are pretty good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I think that's a good point to end on, Billy. And like you said, we can always come back to other subjects later down the line. But yeah, I think it's been a good dive into everything that we kind of set out to do. We talked about UX, we talked about kind of dreams and hopes, and stabilizing yourself in the industry. And I think there's a lot to unpack there, especially 2+ hours. Like, I think it's a lot for people to take in. But if you're still here, thanks very much for sticking out, guys. I'm sure Billy appreciates it. I definitely do.
Yes, so, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, just to say thanks to Billy. Thank you for coming on and giving up your time. It was a real pleasure to talk to you. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you, Gordon. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And also, I mean, whether we record it or not, call me up anytime. I love to celebrate other people's accomplishments, and I want to keep hearing about what you're working on in your development, because you sound like you're building a really cool story right now. You know what I mean? I'm glad to have been a little part of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Billy. If you guys have any questions for Billy about UX, UI, or even just the industry in general, you'll find all his links below. I'll make sure to leave them all, and you guys can reach out. Of course, he is a very busy man, so he doesn't get back to you straight away. Just have patience, but I'm sure he will try to answer any questions you have. And also check out Airship, of course, who Billy works for. They make some awesome games right now. They just announced their most recent game with Riot, and that whole world as well. So that's going to be super exciting whenever that gets more stuff revealed. But yeah, Airship do awesome stuff. They've already got Darksiders out. They've already got Battlechasers. So there's a body of work there. If you want to see Billy's stuff in the field and the real life situation, there's plenty there to go look at. And of course, his ArtStation, which I'll leave below as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks again for tuning in. If you want to check out anything more, we're on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, everything really, including YouTube, where we have the video version of this if you're listening elsewhere. And check those out there. But again, thanks to you guys for listening. Thanks to Billy, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye, guys.